Michigan Republican gubernatorial nominee Tudor Dixon held a rally Tuesday night where she responded to attacks from former President Obama and her opponent, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Dixon, a former conservative commentator, stayed on message, slamming the incumbent governor for her education policies during the COVID-19 pandemic. Recent polling has shown Dixon still trailing Whitmer, but the Democratic Party has funneled huge money into protecting Whitmer from becoming a one-term governor. This past weekend, former President Obama visited Michigan to campaign for Whitmer.
It's so exciting to see these rooms so filled with people. This is such an exciting year to take our state back. Are you ready? Yeah! So, here we are in Traverse City. A few days ago, Barack Obama went to Detroit. Just wanted to let you know what Garland Gilchrist said when he came out on stage. He came out and he said, "This election is about political power, and we get political power from Detroit." Let me tell you what I think. This election is about choosing the right leader to serve you, and that is a decision made by the entire state. I don't know if you heard, but we recently had a little debate with Gretchen Whitmer. So just on the off chance you thought something different, your kids were out of school for 3 months. I jokingly said, we have an announcement to make. Gretchen Whitmer has decided to change the number of days in a month. And one of the news guys tweeted that out. I'm like, does he get the joke? Or, you never know with those folks. They're so sensitive. Well, I mean, think about that moment in time when she kind of like says it out of the side of her mouth with this creepy grin. Our kids were out of school for 3 months. It was that moment in time where I think the majority of the state went, how dare you? But the really interesting thing is that as a parent, it was outraging. I mean, I'm sitting there like, you've got to be kidding me that you're saying this. But it's the reaction of the children that has been so shocking, because I've had parents come up to me and they said, when you said that there was an audible gasp, there was, but it was our kids in the house who went, that's not true. And the devastation of that moment, because they were locked out of school, out of sports, out of milestone moments like graduation and prom, and she just acted like that didn't happen? How can you do that? But it's almost an SNL skit of a politician. And how can you even honestly think that we are all going to go, oh yeah, I guess it was 3 months. But this is how she's looking at the learning loss and everything that went along with this. And that's why we are fighting so hard for this state right now, because before COVID, Michigan was 38th in the nation. Now we're in the bottom 10, and I haven't seen this governor do a darn thing to get kids out of this situation. So if you look at surrounding states that were out, close to how long Michigan was out, 60 days would that be? But really, if you look at surrounding states that had kids not out as long, but similar, they had tutoring programs going right away, because leadership is not power, it's leadership. Right. And when you are a leader, you say, this is a crisis, and we have to address it immediately. We have a serious problem and we need a corrective action, and that means we need to make sure that we get tutors into the schools and get our kids back on track. I was on Laura Ingram's podcast earlier today, and the way she said this was so true. She said the real trauma here is that school didn't stop, but the kids did stop learning. And so these kids that missed these crucial steps, got swept on the school train and never got back to the point where they had to learn those things. So how do we do that? We've got to use that money. That money came to us to make sure our kids got back on track. She hasn't done that. We have got to get the tutors in our schools to get these kids back to where they need to be. We presented our tutoring plan, and about 7 days later, Gretchen Whitmer was like, I have an idea, let's have a tutoring plan. Let's just have somebody else do it, because you've obviously failed in every other category. And still, last time I checked it now, is it November? Still no tutors in the schools. So I had a reporter, that's what somebody said to me early on, your slogan should be Michigan needs a tutor. So I had this reporter one day say to me, you really hung up on this third grade reading thing. And I was like, yeah, kinda. And she said, don't you just think that there are some kids that aren't going to read by third grade? I said, okay, pick which ones. And she's real silent, right? I said, because to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of parents coming up to me and saying, you know that reading thing? We don't do that in our house. Not into the reading. The fact of the matter is that's a key step, and that's what we're missing in the state of Michigan. If we look at kids, there's a true reality that from kindergarten to third grade, you're learning to read. From third grade on, you're reading to learn. We are stealing the key to open the rest of the world from our children. That is not okay. The fact that we are robbing them of this crucial fundamental of education and then saying, you know what, we don't want to abide by the third grade reading law. We don't want to push these kids too hard. But we have this other weird focus in our schools. Suddenly we've got this sex and gender that they're really concerned. On the other side, it's like, is third grade reading that important? We can talk about sex and gender. So we come out and we say, we're going to have a Florida-style law. No sex and gender talk. No sex and gender talk from kindergarten to third grade. And you still have people like, oh, I cannot believe that woman's talking about that. And I'm thinking to myself, how are we here? How is it possible that I have to say that we have to make these laws? And then I always love the reporters that are like, do you really think that's a problem in Michigan? And I'm like, it's not going to be now. We're not going to have to worry about it because we're going to protect our kids. But that's something that we talked about in the debate too. I don't know if you heard when I think she thought this was like a really strong line and she was going to bust me with this. She's like, my opponent thinks that books are more dangerous than guns. And I'm like, can we agree that both things are dangerous if used the wrong way? And that perhaps we should take both things seriously? Because the last time I checked, the only one of us that was governor when we had a school shooting in the state of Michigan was Gretchen Whitmer. And the only person that had the ability to do something and chose to do nothing was Gretchen Whitmer. Because I remember after that happened, she came out and said, I think we need to have a discussion. But a discussion doesn't protect our kids. She said, my opponent would have armed guards in our schools. What do you think is protecting Gretchen Whitmer right now? what's good for her, I say that's good for our kids too. But she has a habit of this, rules for thee but not for me, right? Because I seem to remember a time when she came out and was pretty darn sure that Florida was the most dangerous state in the country. It was like a 2-week period where she would come out in multiple different leather jackets, tell us, whatever you do, don't go to Florida. There is a madman running that state that's letting people be free. Do not do this. And then all of a sudden these pictures start leaking out from Facebook because this is how arrogant the staff is. Let's go to the beach in Alabama and then post pictures of it. And everybody here is like, huh? That person works for you, right? And then the real kicker is, turns out that even though she's saying this to us about Florida, she just got back from a trip to Florida on a private jet. The real kicker to this is, think about this. We've all been locked away from our families. We've been locked away from our loved ones who were sick. No funerals, no holding hands in their last moments, children dying without their parents, parents dying without their children. And she comes back and had the nerve to say, my father was sick, and if I hadn't gone, the Republicans would say, I don't have family values. How can you even look at the state of Michigan and say that when those of us who lost loved ones look through a window? Because that's what happened to my grandmother. The one thing we know about seniors is you don't walk them away from their families. So many people tell me we lost my mother, my father, my brother in a nursing home, and it wasn't COVID, it was a broken heart. And that happened to me. We got the call that my grandmother was at the end of life, and she was fine. She was mentally fine, everything was fine, but she was so lonely. And they said, come and look through the window. I mean, think about that. Gretchen Whitmer goes on a private jet to see her father, and we have to go look through a window. And I remember stepping back at the time and taking a picture of my 4 girls, my sister and her daughter, looking through the window and thinking, this is the last memory we'll have of being with her, even though that's not even with her. And if you look in that picture to this day, you see families down the line looking in those windows. That was how we were treated. And she has the nerve to say, if I didn't fly on a private jet to Florida, I would be accused of not having family values, but she'll rip away any chance we have of being with our family. So I say she can go to Florida for good. But it's not only that part of that discussion that bothers me. It's the fact when she looks at me and says, my opponent thinks that books are more dangerous than guns, she's ignoring the fact that there are parents out there that are saying, these books are not okay. And just in case you were wondering how she felt about it, because we've been wondering, when the superintendent came out and said, we've got a training that asks kids on day 1 what their gender is, what their pronouns are, what their name is, and then tell our teachers not to tell parents, we were wondering what Gretchen Whitmer thought of it, but she was silent. And then went on to say that if these kids are considering self-harm or harming someone else, do not tell mom and dad, because mom and dad are the danger. How dare they? And so we say, where does Gretchen Whitmer stand? And we get, she created a parents' council. Raise your hand if you're on the parents' council. What? No hands? I'm shocked. I've never had a single person raise their hand. And I've never heard a single thing from the Parents' Council about this baloney that's in our schools. So the only conclusion I can come to is the fact that she makes fun of parents who think that books can be dangerous means she doesn't care. So she's out there on the trail saying, my opponent is filled with conspiracy theories. Maybe she should actually open one of these books and read it, and then she could be educated like we are. The difference between our side and their side is that I'm not trying to scare you off from Gretchen Whitmer. We are just simply stating facts about the way she has decided to run this state. That's what, it's funny, when I started this, people were like, who is this girl? Why does she think she can do this? And people were like, we just think you're so nice. You're not going to be able to go up against Gretchen Whitmer. And I was like, we don't have to be nasty. We just have to be right. When you are right, she gets a little nervous. So we have an opportunity to get parents back involved in the schools. We call it the Parents' Right to Know Act. We don't want you to have to pay or FOIA or whatever it takes to find out what's happening in your child's classroom. We want you to be able to click on the website and find the classroom, see the class syllabus, see the trainings the teacher is taking, see the books in the classroom, see the books in the library. We've found that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and our schools might be looking at We have a real opportunity to make sure students have a chance in this state, that they get a great education in this state, but we got to bring a lot more students to this state. And to do that, we have to get the schools back on track, and we have to fight crime. But to fight crime, that means you actually have to support law enforcement. Said defund the police. But Gretchen, you're on tape saying you support the spirit of defund the police. Notice these quotes. And then she also marched with the folks holding up the signs that said defund the police. And then she actually did, because she vetoed secondary road patrol funding, and she vetoed funding for new corrections officers. And notice when I called her out for the fact that they're manipulating numbers by closing prisons and keeping jails full and making it look like we have low recidivism rates in the state of Michigan, she was like, I have no idea what she's talking about. And I thought to myself, that could be true. She didn't know Ford was leaving, remember that? I think we didn't know Ford was leaving. It's like, what do you know? Have you been paying attention? Because you're supposed to be leading the state. Someone should tell her that. But I think it's time to just let her leave. I've traveled the state and talked to our police officers, and they keep saying to me, we really don't want anything. Just let us do our jobs and support us, and then get out of the way. Yeah. We still think it's important to put $1 billion new dollars into policing. We want to recruit and retain police, and we want to bring honor back to that position. Service members and first responders are the people that let us have the lives that we have. And it's time for us to say thank you. We have another big opportunity in this state, and that is economic development. I don't know if you heard, Gretchen Whitmer, we both had the opportunity to discuss what our plans were at the Detroit Economic Club. And they asked her what her plans were for economic development. And she said she would go to Indiana and Ohio and offer those companies abortion to come to Michigan. Doesn't sound like an economic plan, but it makes a lot of sense as to why we're not growing as a state. When you hear that places like Ford are choosing Kentucky and Tennessee over Michigan, think about this. It's not just that it's Ford, it's the small companies that are leaving too. It's too hard to do business in the state of Michigan today. It's too challenging to get through the regulatory system in the state of Michigan. And she has weaponized her agencies against small businesses. And I see so many people nodding in here because you've had it happen to you. You've had these agencies come in and cite you and fine you and try to shut you down. They're going after our agriculture industry. They're going after our manufacturing industry. They're going after our builders. We've got $1 billion worth of development on the lakeshore that's on hold because of that. She won't tell you that part when it comes to economic development. She won't tell you that there are jobs that could start right now that would be invested in by the people who want to start the companies and not your taxpayer dollars. She won't tell you that because she'd rather take $715 million of your taxpayer dollars and hand it to a Chinese corporation. Having a corporation that has ties to the Chinese Communist Party, it's not because she's so great at economic development, it's because she couldn't get anyone else to come here. So we can fix that. We will reduce 40% of regulations in the first 4 years. And we'll bring this state back. And the funny thing is that the reason we're able to do all of this, the reason that all of you are in this room right now, is actually because she's helping us. I know you're going to think, there's no way. When I first came out of the primary, I had somebody from the media say to me, how do you think you could possibly do this? Gretchen Whitmer has name ID across this whole state. How could you ever get the name ID that Gretchen Whitmer has? And I said, everyone in this state will know my name and Gretchen Whitmer's going to pay for it. Let's face it, you can't watch 5 minutes of TV without seeing this face. So now no matter where I go in this state, if I go to a coffee shop, if I go to the gas station, people come up to me and they're like, I'm voting for you. I'm always like, it's a pleasure doing business with you, Gretch. Thank you. And that's the funny thing, when you see these polls, I don't know if you saw the latest poll, we're tied right now. That's always good for the Republican because of that whispering. So last night, even in my own neighborhood, I'm handing out candy. And this guy comes up and his daughter takes some candy and he says, thank you. And he looks at me and he goes, Are you Tudor Dixon? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, and here we are in my own neighborhood, in my front yard. My neighbors clearly know who I am. And he says, I'm voting for you. So we know there are a lot of quiet Republicans out there, and we're just going to hope and pray that we're going to have a big night on Tuesday. So Gretchen Whitmer says she's fighting like hell. We're fighting with prayer. So I say, go out and talk to your friends, get everybody to the polls, make make sure you pray for an early night, and let's take our state back.